Happy Friday, everybody. James Hancock here. I'm back to review The Running Man, which I saw today in IMAX. The movie is directed by Edgar Wright and adapted from the book by Richard Bachman, who was later outed as Stephen King. And I read my little crummy paperback version of it earlier this summer. And the reason I have two different copies is because I like to read in the bathtub. And the steam can wreak havoc on hardcover novels. In any case, I don't always feel compelled to read the source material before seeing a movie, unless it's a filmmaker and a novelist that I really admire. And I love Edgar Wright, and I love Stephen King. So it gives me no pleasure to say I was 50-50 on the movie. There are some incredible scenes and some fantastic performances, but there's also a ton of dead weight in the plot. The movie's 2 hours and 17 minutes long, but it feels considerably longer. And the movie also has a small case of identity crisis when it comes to the overall tone and style and flavor of the movie. And the final sin of the movie is that they tack on a really strange, abrupt ending that didn't work for me at all. But I'll go spoiler-free for now, but at the end of this video, I will have to tackle some of the changes made to the book. But when it comes to the book and the original adaptation starring Arnold Schwarzenegger from 1987, as well as this new adaptation from 2025, I think of all three, my favorite actually might be the movie starring Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Well, why should I?
Because I'm going to say, please.
But if you're unfamiliar with the book and you're unfamiliar with the original movie, here is the gist from over on IMDb. A man joins a game show in which contestants, allowed to go anywhere in the world, are pursued by hunters hired to kill them. And that description kind of gets the job done, but what it leaves out is the fact that the entire world around you is incentivized to either inform on you, turn you in, or kill you themselves. And so it's basically one man against the entire United States in this dystopian future where it's divided very clearly between the haves and the have-nots, and in an act of desperation to try to get some money to pay for his daughter's medication, the character of Ben Richards joins the Running Man, where basically for a month you're on the run, and the longer you're on the run and the more hunters that you kill that are pursuing you, the more money that you make. Now, let me say this from the outset. I've read 28 books by Stephen King, and that includes nonfiction as well as collections of short stories, but I counted them all out before starting this video. But it's safe to say that he's one of the authors that got me into reading as a kid, and I love many of his books. But when it comes to The Running Man, I didn't really like it. I would say that I had to basically battle my way through it, and I found it to be kind of a grim and joyless experience throughout, almost to the point of self-parody, and I didn't even really like the character of Ben Richards all that much, as originally written by Stephen King. However, I did find the ending gruesomely satisfying, and I should say that the description of the ending in the book is much more gory and disgusting than we see in the final film. But long story short, this is not going to be one of my typical rants where I talk about a filmmaker betraying the original spirit and tone of the source material, because I don't really like the source material, and I feel like if you're going to turn it into a movie, then you do probably need to make a few changes. I know I'm being like the world's biggest hypocrite by saying that perhaps a few changes are needed, but there are a lot of Stephen King stories out there where a few minor changes ultimately led to it becoming a much better movie. Like case in point would be Brian De Palma's adaptation of Carrie. And speaking of which, I'll leave a link down in the description below of my top 10 favorite Stephen King adaptations. But getting back to The Running Man from 2025, you can tell that Edgar Wright and his screenwriting partner, Michael Bacall, did try and spice things up just a little bit. And previously, Michael Bacall and Edgar Wright worked together on Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, which I still think is one of the best movies that Edgar Wright has made, although the Cornetto trilogy, that will always reign supreme in his filmography. But the two of them here and there do manage to inject a few ingredients that are a little bit more upbeat, a little bit more thrilling, and obviously the most crucial ingredient on that front is Glen Powell, because he's given this movie his all. He's charismatic. He's resourceful. He got absolutely fucking shredded for this movie. He doesn't look like Arnold in the original, but he looks very lean and athletic. Whatever he's eating and whatever he's lifting, he's doing an excellent job. And he gets to show off his physique in arguably the best action scene in the movie, where he does the entire scene in a towel before he loses the towel. So for all the ladies out there who are swooning over Glen Powell, the movie might be worth seeing just for that one scene. But he's also an incredibly funny actor, but I worry that this movie's not going to be the star vehicle that he's been looking for or that he deserves. And I feel like that movie was Hitman, but Hitman, I feel like it kind of flew under the radar for a lot of people. But I think that's the best work that we've seen by him to date, although I also really liked him in Everybody Wants Some. But where Glen Powell really shines is in the early parts of the movie, where we see that he's constantly getting fired and blacklisted for sticking out his neck a little bit too far on behalf of his fellow workers. And he's basically trying to buck the system. And if he's working for somebody that is like, irradiating the workers and rendering them sterile, well, then he's going to say something. But in this totalitarian dystopian universe, you're supposed to just, turn a blind eye to whatever the powers that be feel like doing. But due to all the injustices around him, he's developed a little bit of an attitude problem. You might even say he's got a little bit of an anger problem, which leads to a lot of wanton displays of blind aggression, which I found to be very refreshing, because I feel like if there's an ingredient that is missing from a lot of contemporary action movies, it is ruthless aggression, as they used to say in the world of professional wrestling. And so that was very satisfying. Like when you're seeing him trying out for all these reality shows, which basically these reality shows, they're just wood chippers for people that are desperate for money, and the Running Man just happens to be the most lucrative and the most popular and the most successful of all of them. But when you're watching him trying out, Edgar Wright does a really cool thing where he's kind of cutting back and forth between some of the heroic deeds that he's done in the past on behalf of his fellow workers, while showing off his athletic prowess while trying out for the show. And during those scenes, Glen Powell really shines, especially when he's talking to Josh Brolin. You can tell he and Josh Brolin rehearsed these scenes over and over again, because Josh Brolin is just leaning into being the most diabolical villain that he can possibly be. He's fucking Thanos himself, but here he's just a reality TV show producer. But they're just in each other's face, smiling and snarling and talking shit.
Gonna come back here and burn this building down. I promise. That's the spirit.
And at that time, I was like, fuck yeah, this movie's totally working. But then the movie finds that extra special gear when they introduce the game show host, played by Coleman Domingo, and he's got swagger, and he's got attitude, and he's got style and confidence. He's fucking hilarious. And I was thinking to myself, like, all right, game on. This movie is going to fucking rule. And it did for a little while, up through the first major action set piece when Ben Richards is fighting some of the various hunters that are coming after him. And I don't know if I should reveal the identities of the hunters or not, because they are masked up initially, which leads to or adds to their mystique overall. But in my mild spoiler section, I'll make a reference to some of the actors playing the hunters. But at that time, I was thinking, like, this movie's gonna fucking rule. Like, I just sat back with a big goofy smile on my face. But then over the course of the second half of the movie, the air just slowly starts seeping out of the balloon, and you start thinking to yourself, like, wait a second, what's missing? How come this isn't fun anymore? And it really starts getting embedded in like kind of the counter-revolutionary tactics of the have-nots versus the haves, and all that stuff comes right out of the book. Like, if you want to point a finger at some of the movie's shortcomings, not all the movie's shortcomings, but some of the movie's shortcomings, you can point right at Stephen King, because he wrote like a real bummer of a book. It's a dreary, kind of sad experience. And I think in defense of Edgar Wright and Glen Powell and everybody who worked on this movie, they actually managed to kind of jazz it up and like kind of like give it some electricity and make it live and breathe.
Are you crazy?
Especially the scenes where Glen Powell is just flipping the double bird to authority. If you have any anti-authoritarian instincts in you whatsoever, whether it's authoritarianism from the left, right, or center, any authoritarianism of any kind, you're going to really respond to Glen Powell's initial emotional reactions, where he's like,
So kiss my ass twice.
Right there is why you can win this game.
But whether you were sent to the principal's office one too many times as a kid, or you've been sent down to human resources at your job for telling one too many dirty jokes, if you have a resistance to authority of any kind, then you're going to respond to Glen Powell as he's pushing back against all these, against all the suits that are basically telling him what to do, what to say. And when he refuses to do what they say or speak how they would like him to do so, they just use deep fakes and AI, and they just fake it. It is reality TV, and they like the spontaneity of reality TV, and they like how unpredictable human beings can be. But if you're doing anything that might contradict their narrative or bring the ratings down, they would just fake it until you come back around and see things from their point of view. But where this movie really starts to suck wind is in the latter half of the movie, when they're trying to turn Ben Richards into the figurehead for this countercultural kind of anti-authoritarian movement that's a grassroots movement. It's like everywhere he goes, he bumps into people that are a part of the resistance, trying to push back against the status quo. But it's not that inspired, and it's not that exciting, and it's not that entertaining. And at a certain point, the movie just becomes kind of a drag to watch. So like I said at the beginning of my video, if you were to choose between the original book, the 1987 adaptation, or the 2025 adaptation, I think the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie is by far the most entertaining, but
You cold-blooded bastard. I'll tell you what I think of it. I live to see you eat that contract. But I hope you leave enough room for my fist, because I'm going to ram it into your stomach and break your goddamn spine!
But if you're fascinated by this environment, you're fascinated by this character, if you're fascinated by this dystopian hellhole, by all means, dive into all three and form your own opinions. But before I wrap up this video, I do have one or two minor spoilers that I want to get into. So last warning, 3, 2, 1, all bets are off. Let's get into it. So let's start with Carl Glusman and Lee Pace as two of the hunters coming after Ben Richards. I really enjoy their performances. They are hell on wheels, they are lethal, they're resourceful. Like, you really believe that this team of hunters is basically capable of hunting you down to the ends of the earth. Sooner or later, they will find you. And then, once again, the show's the running man, not the hiding man. So they're going to keep you moving because it's good for ratings. You need footage, you need action. And I enjoyed the great majority of the face-offs, in particular the one where Glen Powell's running around in a towel just trying to stay alive. That scene was hilarious. And then toward the end, the final face-off in the airplane was pretty goddamn good as well. It's not as revolting as the fight scene is in the novel, because in the novel, by the time he gets on the plane, Ben Richards is suffering from a variety of injuries, and at one point, like, he gets disemboweled and he gets like his intestines looped around something as he's trying to seize control over the plane. I mean, it's fucking horrific. But what's really cool about Lee Pace's performance is that we realize late in the movies that he was the original running man who made it 29 days before they finally offered him, why don't you come join the corporation that's been hunting you and become like the #1 hunter on the show moving forward. And Josh Brolin, in a devilish piece of villainy, makes a similar offer to Ben Richards. He's like, look, we got your new show, The 600, all lined up. All you got to do is sign on the dotted line, and we're off to the races. And at this time, I really thought the movie was going to stick the landing if they'd stuck with the ending from the book. Once again, I don't like the book, but I like the ending, because in the book, Ben Richards takes the plane and he crashes it right into the skyscraper for the reality TV company that produces the show, The Running Man. It's very satisfying. But in the movie, they decide to fake his death and have him come back as like a counter-revolutionary who takes down the show. Like, he's all masked up and like leading his fellow revolutionaries into the studio, and the crew is starting to basically push back against Josh Brolin, and it all just felt very tacked on, unearned, and abrupt. Like, if you want to change the ending of the novel, more power to you. The book probably needed quite a few changes. But you can't just take your new ending like silly putty and kind of slap it on and say, oh, by the way, the daughter and the wife, they lived, and Ben Richards, he's going to be this counter-revolutionary hero, and everybody's going to go home with a smile on their face. It just felt unearned, and it kind of cheapened the story. And if the movie had ended with Glen Powell flying into the skyscraper saying, like, eat shit, motherfuckers, ah! Like, that could have been incredibly satisfying. I have a feeling that I don't think this movie's going to do all that well, but at least if you're going to go down, at least go down fighting with a really kick-ass ending. And I think what we're left with now is a movie with a very strong beginning, a very promising start, and then just slowly but surely it all falls to pieces, in spite of having some really terrific performances scattered throughout. Like Katie O'Brien, they give her almost nothing to work with in this movie. And for whatever reason, they decide to add 2 additional running men or ladies or whatever you want to call them into the drama. So you're kind of cross-cutting between all the various contestants in the show. And Katie O'Brien, I like how she takes her freedom and her money and goes right to the titty bar, because like in real life, she's into the ladies, and she's just, got ass and titties all around her before she goes down in a blaze of glory. But her story, like the ending of the movie, also just felt like silly putty that had been kind of slapped onto it without actually really kind of like weaving it into the overall story at hand. And throughout the movie, there are just little details where you can feel like they're deliberately and willfully trying to soften the overall narrative. Like in the original novel, Ben Richards' wife, in order to make extra money on the side, just to pay for food and for their survival, she basically works part-time as a prostitute. She's a streetwalker. She brings in a little extra money because Ben Richards has been blacklisted for so long. But now in this new movie, she's like a cocktail waitress who maybe she's like showing her cleavage for tips and that sort of thing. But once again, they're softening the story. Or later on in the movie, the character played by Michael Cera has a crazy mom who believes everything that she sees on TV, believes all propaganda. And in the book, she turns in both Ben Richards as well as her son, and ultimately ends up leading to her son getting killed. But here, instead of having the mother do the bad thing, for whatever reason, they decide that Michael Cera, he's got a bone to pick with authority. And so even though he's trying to protect Ben Richards and get him out of there, he wants to have one final fight with the corrupt cops beforehand, so he ends up like ringing the alarm himself. It just didn't seem to make any sense. So going into this movie, I really wanted it to be good, but just because you want a movie to be good doesn't mean it is good. At a certain point, you have to kind of take off your fan hat and put on your analytical hat and say, like, did they pull it off? And like I said before, I think it's 50-50. And of all 4 Stephen King movies that have come out this year, between The Monkey, which is based on the short story from the Skeleton Crew, Life of Chuck, was it Mystery Chuck? Life of Chuck? What the fuck was that movie called with Tom Hiddleston? Hang on. I think it's Life of Chuck. Life of Chuck by Mike Flanagan, as well as, what else was there? What was the big one? Oh, and The Long Walk, which came out earlier this year, and now The Running Man. How would I rank them? I mean, it's been a big year for Stephen King. 4 huge movie adaptations, 3 of which had never been done before, and one of which was, like a fresh adaptation. What is my favorite of the bunch? Either The Monkey or The Long Walk. I'm going to go The Monkey, The Long Walk, and maybe in last place a tie between Life of Chuck and The Running Man. I think they're all pretty good, but I think The Monkey might be the most entertaining, or the one that I would be most inclined to rewatch if I was just like, hanging out with friends or family and we're like, well, let's watch one of the Stephen King movies. Which one are you going to vote for? I've seen all of them one time each. I would probably vote for The Monkey for my first rewatch of the 4. But I think that's about all I have to say. I'll be rooting for Edgar Wright and Glen Powell in the future, but I worry that this movie will negatively impact both of their careers. But Edgar Wright, he's so fucking likable, and he's so charming, and he's such a giant movie nerd. Every time he talks about movies, I just, fall in love with the guy all over again. I'm rooting for him all the way. He's just never able to completely close the deal and deliver a massive smash hit in spite of having many turns at bat. I just want to say, dude, make a James Bond movie or do whatever you need to do, but give us the hit that will allow you to continue to make movies successfully for the next 15, 20 years. Because between that TV show Spaced back in the early days and obviously Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz and Scott Pilgrim vs. the World and The World's End, I mean, he was just on such a roll. But I really enjoyed Baby Driver as well. Maybe my least favorite of his movies is, Last Night in Soho, I think is what it was called. I can't remember. The one with Anya Taylor-Joy. Hang on, let me bring up his IMDb profile. Yeah, Last Night in Soho from 2021. And he's also got his documentary about the Sparks Brothers. I think The Running Man is closer to the bottom than it is to the top, because I think Baby Driver's better. The World's End is definitely more funny. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, I still think it's a really underrated movie. Hot Fuzz is a total fucking blast, and obviously Shaun of the Dead is a fucking full-blown horror comedy classic. So I'm rooting for you, Edgar Wright, and I'm rooting for you, Glen Powell. I just don't think that the Running Man is going to be the movie that gets the job done for now. But hope everybody has a great weekend at the movies. And if you enjoyed this video, please consider liking, subscribing, hitting the notification bell. I'll be back at y'all soon with some box office breakdowns. I'm also seeing Hamnet on Sunday, and I'll be reviewing the season 2 premiere of Landman. So plenty of videos right over the horizon. But thank you again for watching. I greatly appreciate it. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.